So, as I said, motivation and confidence, two key areas that we'll be working on today. Now, for anyone that doesn't know already, I'm going to give you a little bit of a lesson about the conscious and the unconscious mind, or the subconscious. And this is a huge part of the work that we do in hypnotherapy. The conscious mind is the part of the mind, or the part of the brain where you have your decision making. It's the analytical side of the mind. You're thinking all day long, but the key point is it only holds a few thoughts or ideas at the one time. So that's when you can hear the self-talk. That's your conscious mind. When that talking to yourself, oh, I've got this to do, I've got that to do, I've got multiple tasks to do, but it can only hold a few thoughts and ideas at the one time. The unconscious mind, on the other hand, works differently. That holds the programs. I don't know if you can see it all. You might need to move the little icons with the people. Don't know if you can see it all, but it holds the programs within the mind, the automatic, your automatic thoughts, your sort of autopilot behaviours. So for example, let's say you get up in the morning and before you know it, you've been in, you're showered, your teeth are brushed and you're sitting downstairs fully clothed and you're sitting with your breakfast. There was not really very much thought goes into that, but that's because these automatic programs, all these programs that you've built over the years actually happen at a subconscious level. You don't really need to engage very much thought in that. And this is the part with hypnotherapy where it really comes into play, because when you're under hypnosis, the creative part of the brain, which is the subconscious part of the brain, becomes much more receptive to positive suggestion. So the negative part, the conscious mind comes much quieter. So any negative self-talk or anything like that you do with yourself is actually dulled out so that you can fully experience what it's like to feel in the way you want to, see things in the way you want to, experience different things the way you want to, but you will do it without any other interference. And you're most receptive to that during hypnosis because it's the subconscious mind that comes to the forefront there. So you're much more receptive to it. Now, the other important thing about the subconscious mind is those automatic patterns or those programs that you've got already entrenched in your brain. If you think about it, when you were a really young child, when you were a baby, you were only ever working from the subconscious mind. But as you start to get older, you start to build on the conscious mind, which is your analytical thinking. So as soon as you start to build those patterns and those ingrained in behaviours, these two can be held in the subconscious mind. So things that happened many, many years ago can actually be lodged in your subconscious mind. So these then have an ongoing effect in your current day-to-day life. And sometimes we're not able to connect why that happens. For example, you might think that you've got a fear of something and you can't quite figure out, where did this come from? Why on earth do I feel this way about bees or a wasp or some other thing you've got a phobia about? And again, it's probably something that's happened many, many years ago that's been entrenched in your subconscious mind that you've just forgotten about. So it just happens automatically when you say, see a bee or a wasp or something, you have that reaction. So that kind of gives you an explanation about how the two parts of the mind work. I want us to do a little exercise now, everyone, if you're all up for that. This is going to be part of working with your confidence. So if you think about those subconscious patterns that we were talking about, so you may have periods where you give yourself a lot of negative self-talk, you don't quite know why you're giving yourself a hard time for things. So these patterns, as I said, can be lodged in the brain from a way back when, potentially when you were a young child and you just don't remember. So to help you overcome some of these in the short term, I'm going to teach you a little technique. And what I'd like you to do, if you're comfortable with it, is I'd like you to do it with your eyes shut. And it's simply because it would be good for me to just get you to completely go into the zone and find a point where you feel nice and relaxed. So I'm going to talk you through a little story, and I'd like you to just close your eyes. And this story is going to be supporting you with any lacking in confidence, any challenges you have around low self-esteem. If you ever hear those negative voices in your head telling you not so nice things about yourself, repeated self-critical thoughts, the internal bully. So as you think about these experiences and how they may play out in your life, I'm going to talk to you about an experience that you can have now to help you overcome that. So I'd like you to think about now, as you just take a moment to relax, I'd like you to take a deep breath, breathe out from any experiences you've felt throughout the day so far. As you feel your body more and more relaxed as you're sitting in your chair, I'd like you to think now about one person you know perhaps that gives you a present. Perhaps you've been gifted this present. The present is a parrot. Maybe at the start you think it's a good thing, only you discover very quickly that the parrot is actually poisoned. This parrot only recites negative, unhelpful things to you about you. And as you have a visual of that parrot right now, perhaps it's in its cage and you can see it with that negative talk. So I'd like you to imagine, for example, in a situation, perhaps you're going to work, perhaps you're going to a meeting, it doesn't really matter. And you discover that you're actually late for that experience, whether it's work or a meeting or just perhaps meeting a friend. But the reason for that was that the public transport or your car has broken down. This seems like a normal experience that you perhaps would be able to explain away with common sense. However, the parrot is saying to you, you're stupid. You should have got there earlier. You should have made more time. You should have planned your journey better. You're useless. This is the typical thing you do every time. And just ask yourself, does something similar to this sound familiar to you? Now, years of listening to this parrot can really affect the way that we live our lives and behave with ourselves and others. It also really can affect how we think and feel about the world and ourselves. Taking on board a lot of these negative, critical thoughts can make us quite defensive in the way we interact with others. So now I'm going to teach you about an antidote to this. I'd like you to take yourself a moment now and visualize that parrot again. You can see that parrot, perhaps it's on its cage, perhaps it's just somewhere in the room with you. Notice it, hear it, become aware of it. Now I'd like you to cover the cage. Cover the cage and do this again and again, telling yourself, I don't need to listen to this. Because you would not keep a parrot any longer than you had to that treated you this way. So this is your opportunity now to tell this parrot, I don't need to listen to this. Throw in a blanket over the cage. And then just see yourself distracting yourself with something else in your mind's eye. Pottering around the house, perhaps you've went and done another task. But remember, this parrot will keep coming up because we know that the old patterns that live in your unconscious mind are there, but these patterns can be rewritten with practice. If you think about a time when you've perhaps changed your job or changed where you live, or even thinking about the situation we're in at the moment, where most of us now are working from home, think how easy it was to adapt yourself to that new pattern. It felt tricky at first, it felt uncomfortable. Maybe we even fought against it. But after a short period of time, we accept that this is the way it is, because our minds, our patterns can be rewritten with practice. So the more and more that you practice putting the blanket over that cage and telling yourself, telling that parrot, I don't need to listen to this. Get up and distract yourself with something else. The easier it will become until one day you'll likely open a window and let that parrot out the door. So now I'd just like you to take a deep breath. Release from that experience and then just open your eyes, feeling refreshed. So I'll open it up to anyone that feels brave enough if you want to come off mute and maybe share some of your experience, how you felt.
It was really, really interesting. Thinking of that negative voice as a parrot, I think is just the perfect metaphor. I never thought about it in these terms, but it just makes perfect sense. And it's just such a satisfying moment, imagining putting a blanket over its cage and shutting it down. I think it's very powerful. So thank you for that. I enjoyed it.
Anyone else want to share anything?
I find it really relaxing, Debbie. I think you've got a lovely voice and it's just really soothing, and I just feel really relaxed. I feel like I could still listen to you the whole time and I could hear what you were saying, but it was just really, really nice and relaxing.
Good, I'm glad to hear it. So whilst we weren't in any kind of stage of hypnosis there, the experience starts to take you into that hypnotic world. And it's just to let people get a little bit of an experience of some of the ways that you can feel. And that's just a technique that's not really necessarily related to hypnotherapy. It's just something in my toolbox that I've used during therapeutic interventions with people. And it's something that you can use at any time now, because that's it. The most important thing is when we use a metaphor like the parrot, you've seen it on the screen now, you've related negative thinking to the parrot, so you'll straight away go back to what I've told you today and put the blanket over it. It's embedded now in the mind. Okay, so we'll move on from that. Thanks very much, everyone. So the next one that we're going to have a talk about is motivation. And we think to ourselves, well, what does motivation really mean? So is motivation, or what prevents us from doing things, is it really a lack of motivation, or is it something else? So when we think lack of motivation, I don't know about you, but for me, the first thing that comes up is the procrastination. It's the endless telephone calls to other people to discuss what I'm not doing. And in 4 hours, I think, well, if I hadn't spoke to 5 people over 4 hours, I probably could have achieved something. So it's recognising when we are procrastinating. And difficult, I think, at the moment as well, when a lot of us are working from home, there's a lot of distraction, a lot of avoidance behaviours, social media, there's the TV, there's a lot of more availability of people to talk to, because a lot of us are in the same position. And I don't know about anybody else, but we often find ourselves that we will do any other task that feels easy than actually tackling the really tricky one in hand. So for me, when I was at university, up until last year doing my open uni degree, my house was never tidier than it ever was when I was at uni. And that's because to sit down and write an assignment that was due on a deadline, that was tricky, and in 4th year uni at honours level, you know, I would much rather have gone in and started clearing out cupboards, which had no relevance to the situation, but that's one of your key ideas of avoidance, because that's what we do. And I'll give you a wee explanation about why that probably happens in a second. The other thing we have as well is this fear of failure, or a fear of trying again. Say we've maybe been unsuccessful once or twice, we have a real fear of trying again. So that's another area that can really impact our motivation, because it takes us away from wanting to do it. But I want to tell you a little bit about the brain in relation to this, and then I want to read you a little short story. So the brain is actually wired to protect us from danger. So if you think of way back caveman days, the brain had to be super alert, because if we were out hunting and there was a lion in the background, or we saw something like that, that's where what we would do is, very likelihood is we freeze for a moment, and then the brain makes a decision, we're in danger, what do we do? Do we fight it, or do we run away? So that's your fight or flight mode that we can get into with the brain. So your unconscious mind is happily just mulling along in its life, doing all the things you need to do without having to think about anything in general. So that's all your normal subconscious patterns that are running those programs. But what happens is when you get to a point where something that might just be a wee bit trickier or something that you're trying to potentially avoid, what happens is we hesitate. So you're carrying on as normal. You think about this assignment, you think about that work task, and you think, oh, the body hesitates. And because when in old caveman days or whatever, this is an alert to the brain that there's a potential danger. Now, I was never going to be in danger of doing an assignment, but the point is the feeling is still the same. It's that stopping, the hesitating, the freezing, because the body feels that I'm going to do something that's harmful. Sometimes it felt harmful, but it wasn't really, but it did feel that way sometimes with an assignment. So the point is that if we were ever going to sit about and wait to feel motivated to do something, you're never going to feel overly motivated to do something that really scares you, because you feel that you're going to be in danger. It's uncomfortable. So my suggestion for anyone is you're always only one decision away from having a completely different life. And I don't mean from waking up to being a millionaire to today in your current situation. That's not what I mean. I'm meaning one small decision on do the task, don't do the task, do one paragraph of the assignment, don't do it. You're one decision away from making things really different for yourself. And if you take things back to that poison parrot, if you felt, for me, for example, if I use the uni analogy again, I would maybe have negative self-talk. You just don't know what you're doing. You've never been really good at getting good results, which, by the way, was a load of rubbish. So if I was then thinking about the poison parrot, I should have talked to myself, thrown the blanket over it, and it may well have got me that nudge to go forward to the next stage. So just be mindful about those extra decisions. Just one decision to do or not to do can actually be life-changing in that moment and for the future. Now, there was something in the last slide we were talking about the lack of motivation that can come from, I've tried it once, I've tried it 3 times, I've tried it 5 times, I said I'm giving up. Sometimes people only try it once and then give up. I want to read you a wee story. Now, you might already know it, so if you do, just hang in there. But if you don't, then this one is aimed for you. So, Joanna was a single mother living on social security, struggling to make ends meet on £70 a week. She had just split up with a partner and decided to fill her time by working on an idea she had for a book for children. Every morning she sat in her local cafe and wrote, and every afternoon she went home to look after her daughter Jessica. When she'd finally finished her manuscript, she sent it out to the world, where it was rejected by every major publisher in the UK, often with disparaging comments like, "It's too long for children." Finally, one publisher agreed to pay her a tiny advance to put the book out. Today, Harry Potter is one of the greatest literary successes of all time, and J.K. Rowling is one of the most widely read authors on the planet, worth more than £500 million. So, just a little motivational story there to remind us all that sometimes we don't get it the first time, 10th time, 100th time. We have to just keep trying, because with every action there can be progress. Okay,